did you get into fly fishing? First of all, was it something that your parents did or grandparents did?
My dad did it some. Actually, my dad was more of a bird hunter than a fisherman, but he liked to fish, and he had some friends who were pretty, I guess, ardent, you'd say, fly fishers. And when my dad retired at 65, he kind of thought, well, this is a good time I think I'm going to take up fly fishing, because he had some pretty good friends who knew a lot about it. And he started down the path, but for whatever reason, he didn't get that far, but it kind of bypassed him some and settled on me for reasons I can't really articulate.
The regular fishing versus fly fishing. For the listeners, Jim, what's the difference?
Well, the difference, first of all, I always get a little bit of a, I don't know if I smiled there, but a little chuckle when people say regular fishing. And everybody knows what you mean. I mean, the normal fishing. You say, well, another fishing is regular or normal. What's fly fishing? It must be the abnormal fishing. Anyway, never mind. The difference is that if you compare fly fishing to fishing with bait, a worm or something, or even compare fly fishing to fishing with lures, spoons and spinners and things like that. The difference is that when you're fishing with bait, you're actually putting a piece of food on a hook and throw it in the water, and the fish finds it and eats it. If you're fishing with spinning lure, it's a little machine that's been designed to move through the water in a certain way when it's pulled.
Right, the currents.
So make it kind of an attractive movement and sort of inspire the predatory business from the fish. But when you're fly fishing, it's a different premise. The premise is that you're going to try and choose a fly to tie on, the little artificial fly to tie on that imitates something the fish is eating. And so it's a different thing altogether.
So there's no live bait usually when you're.
Nope.
Wow. And Lynda, your wife, has illustrated many great photos in here. Wow.
Yeah, those are all her pieces of art that she's done. That's some of the flies, and there's fish and
I had seen the fly. It was right here. It's in the beginning. There we go. Here we go. So I can show this.
Yeah, there's an example.
Okay.
So the premise is you try and imitate what the fish is eating, and that provides more questions. The thing that people like about fly fishing is it can be really interesting, and it's not so much just a matter of luck. You throw something out there and hope a fish eats it. Well, you can do that. With the fly fishing, you're constantly asking and questions and trying to answer them. Like, well, what would the fish in this place today, at this time of year, in this kind of weather circumstance, what would they be eating? And so you have to kind of try and find out. You don't have to, but that often you do, and that's the interesting part. And you understand what goes on under the water, which is sort of what you're trying to gain, is a little bit of knowledge and maybe even intuition about what's going on under the water. And when you figure things out correctly, you catch a fish. And it's not that straightforward, and it doesn't always work. That's sort of what we're trying to do. I guess maybe when you catch a fish when you're by fly fishing, you have a pretty good idea why you caught the fish. And with the other kinds of fishing, you might, but you're also possible that you just got lucky. And so we think we're smarter when we fly fish.
Oh, absolutely.
We're not always, but
when you're catching these fish, is it usually to take home, or is it more or less sport?
It's almost entirely just sport. I mean, not everywhere, but in the fly fishing my wife and I have done for most of our lives is in moving waters and streams and rivers. And in many places, including in Alberta, the fish in those streams are wild fish. They don't come from a hatchery. There's a lot of lakes that have good fishing where the fish are stocked because they can't successfully reproduce in still water, some species of trout. So those fish, they're not going to reproduce on their own. So taking the fish home and having a nice meal is perfectly. The fish in moving water, because they are the adult fish that are there today are responsible for the next generation of fish. You have to be a little bit more careful with what happens to them, and rather than not letting people fish at all, or just letting people fish and take all the fish home. Catch and release fishing is a regulation through much of Alberta's stream, many of our rivers, as not a perfect answer, but a pretty decent compromise between letting people continue to fish and protecting the population of fish so they can spawn and continue. So
Is it always a challenge for Lynda and yourself, Jim? Or is there a time now where you say, we've perfected this sport, this art?
No, I don't think anybody's ever perfected it. And that's one of the reasons you do it. If you got to the point where, I don't even know what perfecting it would look like. Maybe you could catch a fish anytime you cast or whenever you wanted to. No, it's not like that. It isn't like that for anybody. You get better and you can see progress and you learn things and you apply these things you learn. And that's satisfying to think you're making progress, but there is no end point in fly fishing. So you just you keep on learning it.
Certain techniques and art.
Casting is the physical skill, one of the main physical skill in fly fishing. You have to learn to cast, because I might as well say this here too. There's a difference in the fly fishing tackle compared to like spinning tackle. With the spinning rod, you've got a monofilament or nylon line that's really thin and pretty much weightless, and you string it through the rod and you tie something heavy on the end of it, and you use the rod to throw the thing out in the water, and it takes the line off the reel as it goes. When you're fly fishing, though, much of the time the fly you're using is maybe about an inch long or less, and it's made out of fur and feathers. And if you tie that onto the end of that monofilament spinning line and tried to cast it, it wouldn't go anywhere, because you can't throw feathers unless the feathers are tied to something heavy. And with fly fishing, that's the way it works. The fly is attached to the fly line, which is thick and heavy. So you learn to cast the line, and the little weightless fly goes along with it because it's tied to it. So that's the premise. So that's why the casting is different. Everybody knows when they see somebody fly casting, because it is different. It's not one.
No.
With the spinning rod, you rear back and throw it out there. The fly rod, because you're casting a weight that's in the line, not at the end of the line. It's a whole different thing you do with your hand and your arm. So so that's the physical side of it that you learn too.
So when you're casting, and say for example it goes so far out, do they usually get stuck sometimes on rocks, or how do you deal with situations like that?
Not usually, but sometimes, for sure, they can get stuck on
Branch
on the rocks. And what happens a lot is, because when you're fly casting, you make a back cast behind you, so your line and fly and everything goes up in the air behind you, pretty much the same distance you're going to make it go forward. So if there's trees back there, you'll catch them. So you have to, they catch your fly on lots of things other than fish. But again, you get better at it, and finally you start remembering to look behind you before you start casting to see if there's trees there.
For sure. What is a good day for you, Jim, and your wife, Lynda, when you guys go out? Is it catching 10, 15 fish? Or what is an ideal day that's just like, that was beautiful?
First of all, it has very little to do with the numbers of fish.
Interesting.
It has to do with the place where we do it. Now, this is coming from people who've done this for a long time. There's sort of stages you go through, but I like to go to a place that I probably have. You get to be my age, quite often you're going to places you've been before, and because I like them. So, going to a familiar place that I like is important. And finding some interesting things is important. Hopefully that's to do with the fish. My favorite kind of fishing is fishing with what we call dry flies, which are flies that float on the surface. All flies don't. They're flies that sink and flies that float. And I like fishing with floating flies, dry flies, because it's so visual. You cast the fly out on the water and you're watching it drift along in the current. And then if things go right, you see a fish come up and eat, your fly, the one that's attached to you. And there's a real kick to that for sure. And that's what I like to do. And if I got to do some of that in a day, that's what I would hope for. I mean, it's not like I'd be devastated if it didn't happen. When I had a fly shop in Calgary for quite a long time ago, we used to sell a bumper sticker that said, "A bad day's fishing is better than a good day's work." And so there's quite a lot of truth in there. It's never, let me put it this way. If you go out and the fishing is not good, you don't catch any fish, you never come home and say, "I wish I hadn't gone fishing."
It's true.
It's still okay. The worst it gets is still pretty good. Yes.
I mean, you got to be in the outdoors. What more can you ask for?
Exactly. Starting with that, and depending on who you're with and where you're going.
Yeah.
What you talk about when you're sitting on the bank waiting for the fish to show up.
Jim, why trout?
Oh, because they live here, and so do I.
But is there something about a trout that attracts you? Is there something about that fish that you absolutely admire?
Well, yeah, I think trout are, and I don't have an awful lot of experience with other fish. I have some, but trout are, they live in really nice places. They like relatively, clean, cool water. Most trout streams are not necessarily in the mountains, but a lot of the ones in Alberta come from the mountains. So you're in the foothills sort of country. So they live in nice places. They are very beautiful. Trout, there's the different species of trout all have a different kind of beauty. But people who don't fish would look at a pretty brook trout or a pretty cutthroat trout and say, "Man, that's a pretty fish." Yeah, they all are.
They are, absolutely.
Yeah, and so it's and they have the right sort of instincts, I guess, that sort of satisfy what we're hoping for. And one of those is not being pushovers as far as being how easily they're caught, but they're also not impossible, and that puts them right where we want them to be. Because you can catch them sometimes and sometimes you can't, and that's the way a lot of good things go.
That's the fun.
Yeah, exactly. So that's, and trout, there's also kind of just an admiration for their life, and in Alberta they have some fairly harsh circumstances to live in. We've got long winters where depending on the stream, it might be covered with ice, half the year or something like that, and they know how to negotiate that sort of stuff and to go through their yearly routine of spawning. Depending, some spawn in the spring, and some other species spawn in the fall, but they do that and they keep going. They're kind of survivors, which we really we relate. I guess I kind of relate to trout in some way. I don't want to make too much of it, but
it's your spirit animal.
Yeah, I guess maybe.
Yeah,
I don't know.
could be.
Yeah.
What is trico fishing, Jim?
That's a trico. A trico is a particular kind of mayfly that occurs, that lives on some of the same streams that trout do, and you get, after you've done this for a few years, you get to know a little bit about the different kinds of insects that the fish feed on. And that's all, without getting too deep into this. Mayflies, caddisflies, and stoneflies are the three main types of aquatic insects that trout feed on. And every one of these, and in fact, every species of every one of these types of flies has its own sort of season of when it's available in the adult form, and it follows the same sequence every year. It's not a random thing. So trico is one type of mayfly that usually is around on some rivers, particularly the Bow, in basically in August and September. You don't see them in June or May or November or anything like that. And so it's the best way to, maybe a good parallel between this, the sequence of, we call them hatches, the insect hatches, is similar to the way wildflowers bloom. They'll always bloom in pretty much the same sequence. We don't have any crocuses blooming now. Well, in April, in the prairie, you'll find crocuses. That's what they do. So all these insects are like that. So the trico is one kind of mayfly that is really abundant in this time of year, in August and September.
Are you seeing a rise in wild trout, or has it declined over the past 55 years?
There is some evidence that the numbers of fish have declined. It's hard to know exactly what the cause would be. It's also hard to know the severity. The problem is the population of fish, as with any wild thing, is never completely stable. You know, it's going to go up and it's going to go down. So if you, and we really don't have information. We don't have live time. We've got real time information on the fish population. For instance, the last, I don't remember, but quite often the population studies are done on some streams where the biologists come up with an assessment or an estimate of fish populations, but it's never for last week. It'll be for last year or maybe 2 or 3 years before that. So you're always, you know, behind the curve. So if it's down,
We don't know.
Is it kind of a natural thing, or is it bottoming out, or is it getting better? And it's only over a long time you can get a trend. And there are some people who think, and with some evidence that the numbers of fish in some places may be down. There's all sorts of possibilities. Habitat is always a big factor. These are wild things. They have to have places where they can thrive and reproduce, and certainly things like logging in headwater streams that does bad things to the watershed, and even whether you can call it climate change or not, I don't know, but we're in kind of a cycle of warm weather these days, and as the water gets let me say it this way, sort of the top range of comfort, I guess, for most trout, it would be around, would be under 20 degrees Celsius. And it seems like we're getting more occasions when the water temperature in our streams gets above that. And this can be made worse by withdrawals of water for various things, including irrigation. So, you know, the sad irony as far as irrigation and trout streams is that the times when the irrigated farmland needs the most water are in the years when the streams have the least water, because it's a dry year. You know, if it's a hot, dry year, the streams don't have as much water, and the irrigators want more. So that's a bit of a conundrum, and that can affect things. I mean, there's all sorts of things that pose threats to the habitat of the fish, and thereby to the numbers of fish. And I will say one of the things that is one of the things that's really good about the situation is that we do have people who are kind of out there, you know, interacting directly with the resource, and these are the people who fish, you know, and so that's a really important thing. It's always been the greatest defenders of fish and wildlife have always been the people who are closest to these creatures, and that's people who hunt and fish. And it's the same with trout, and there's organizations like Trout Unlimited, and is that yours?
My little guy just barked after yours did.
Barking at mine. Isn't that funny?
That's funny.
Yeah, it is. It is. Yeah. So you know, it's good that we have people out there who can keep an eye on things and report to provincial biologists and things like that if they see things going on. And of course, we had the big the threat that's still, I'm afraid, there to some degree about expansion of open pit coal mining in the foothills of southwestern Alberta, or just western Alberta, which would be terrible. I mean, it does nasty things to the water, and it uses it all up, and it's kind of irreparable. So there's always stuff like that, and history shows, and it continues to be the case, that the people who are out there, or people who care about it most, are the people who are going to try and do something about it.
Mhm.
And those are the people who are right there in it the most.
Yeah. When you go out there, Jim, do you still have the same love and passion and curiosity that you had 50 plus years ago?
Oh yeah, I think so. I think
Mhm.
the fire to have to catch fish is diminished, and I think that's probably pretty natural.
Mhm.
Uh, yeah, I like to go. I like to just sort of see that everything's okay, and that there
Interesting.
are
Yeah.
fish where there's supposed to be fish. And it's yeah, it's less about catching fish. I still like to catch fish, but it's
But the perspective has changed now.
yeah, I guess that's what it is. I mean, I hope this doesn't sound arrogant or something, but I'm over even a clunky fisherman like me over 55 years. I caught quite a few fish, so
Yeah.
catching one more is probably not going to make my overall appreciation of fly fishing. It's not going to change it.
Exactly. And now if I went out with you, that's all I would want to do is like, did I
Sure.
get you fish? Because it's exciting, right? It's your first
Oh, it
time.
is.
It's a
Yep.
journey. And I'm sure for many years that was like what it was for you. But as time has
Mhm.
moved on, you're saying, okay, well, what's the waters like now? What's the environment they're living in?
Yeah. Yeah. You kind of, as I said, it's stages you go through, and none of the stages are incorrect. I don't think the first one. I mean, this is cited often when people are talking about this sort of thing. At first, well, it's not even just fly fishing, but when somebody goes fishing for the first time, they want to catch a fish. I don't care what kind of fish. I don't care how big it is. I don't care how many. I want to catch a fish. And after you do that, you want to catch some more fish. And they kind of like, I want to catch lots of fish. I don't care how big they are. I just want to catch lots. And after
So
that,
true.
I want to catch, I think I'd like to catch big fish. I want to try and catch a big fish. So you go through those stages, and eventually it's like, I want to go fishing.
I went ice fishing, and that's all I was hoping for. Come on, in that
Sure.
one of those holes,
Yeah.
get it. Yeah.
No, and that's completely normal. That's the way it should be. And I was like that for a long time. Felt like a long time when I was stuck way down the scale there, and I don't know why I needed to catch fish so bad, but I really did. I just craved it.
Mhm.
That craving is lessened a lot, but
Yeah.
I still value doing it a lot.
In your last chapter of your book, Jim, you speak about aging and what it was like back then, which I thought was super cool. Fishing in the dark.
Oh yeah,
That is neat.
it's nuts.
It's crazy.
Well, it can be. It's a thing that some people like to do, and you can read stories about it, and there's certain fish that are more active. They're not necessarily nocturnal, but they really like low light, brown trout in particular. Um, it's almost the legend of the big fish come out at night sort of thing. So okay, well, we'll go fish at night for them. I tried it a few times, and I think I wrote about it in there. It just seems sort of silly. Of course, that's because I didn't catch anything. If I caught a great big fish, I'd have been complete on board with night fishing.
Mhm.
But I didn't that once when I tried it.
The sport, the art of fly fishing, is that declining or have you seen a rise?
I think there's been a rise.
Yeah.
It's sort of ebbed and flowed quite a bit. The big um, increase in fly fishing interest came with the movie A River Runs Through It, which was what, 1990 maybe. There's a big increase then. People just saw it and it looked beautiful and they wanted to do it. And but the effects of that have been gone for quite a while now. But
Yeah.
a couple of things are happening. One of them is COVID drove people outdoors a lot. I don't know if you do any hiking or biking or anything, but the hiking trails are full of people, and the parking lots at the trailheads are busy, and
Staycation.
yeah, that sort of thing. Yeah, we're not going anywhere. And they also, at the height of COVID, it was like, well, the best thing you can do, the safest things you can do are outside. Okay,
Outside. Yeah.
let's go for a hike. And that happened in fly fishing too. Like a lot of people were, I guess, working from home and maybe could arrange their work schedules so that they could go out during the week instead and work the weekend if they wanted to. And I think quite a few people had it in mind that someday I'd like to take up fly fishing. And now it seems like we should be doing something outdoors. Maybe we'll try it now. So there was a lot of interest and a lot of newcomers to the sport through COVID. And the other thing that's happening is it's become, well, let me back up. 20 years ago, I remember some conversations with people in the fly fishing business as I was then. And our concern was there's not that many young people taking it up. Everybody who's doing it was in their 50s or 60s or more. And that's kind of changed in the last, I don't know, 5 or 10 years, I guess. There's in certain circles, it's become sort of trendy, I guess, to fly fish. And you do run across quite a lot of people in their 20s and 30s who are fly fishing now. And the other really good thing there is there's quite a lot of women taking it up now. That's been forecasted for a long time, that there were going to be more and more women, but it really didn't happen that much. But it's happening now. There's if you go into any of the Calgary fly shops, you're as likely to talk to a woman working there as a man. And
It's interesting. Yeah, it changed over time. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's changed over time. That's great. And there are a number of women guides around who are really, really good fly fishing guides.
Right.
Who just happen to be women. So I think that's a really good trend.
Are you guys still hosting seminars or continuing to be guides?
Well, we haven't really guided.
I don't know if that's a word I would call it. Yeah.
We consider ourselves instructors. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're still doing some of that. We've cut it back a little bit because we are getting we're getting on in years,
What are you talking about? You look young, Jim.
Well, good. Yeah, we'll leave it there. But yeah, we're still doing that. We do some schools every year, and we've got a few more left this year, not too many. But yeah, that's been our main sort of winter occupation for a long time now, is running our fly fishing schools, and we have some other instructors as well as doing it ourselves. So it's been great.
Someone here in Calgary would like to fly fish. Where do we start? Where do we go?
Well, the best thing to do, and of course I'm biased, but the best thing to do is to take a class. We do classes for new fly fishers, people taking it up. We have 1 2-day introductory class left on September 10th and 11th or something. I don't know if I can say that. And also most of the fly shops will have fly fishing classes, and it's a really good way to start because you can get all the goofy questions answered. Nothing about fly fishing is particularly difficult, but most of it is different than what you've done before. And so, this I talked about the weight being in the line, not what you tie to the end of the line, like that sort of stuff. You can reveal a lot of that sort of stuff really quickly and easily when you're teaching someone. And the casting too, it's really hard to learn to cast properly from a book. No, and it's not hard in general. If you have somebody, an instructor who's experienced, they can teach you cast, but it's hard for you to do it either on your own or with a book. The best thing, other than a real person, to teach the casting is some instructional videos, and there's lots of those that are available on YouTube. They're free, of course. And but the problem with that, the reason the real instructor is better is because if you're watching a YouTube video of a really qualified, really good instructor, you get to hear him tell you what he's doing, and you get to see him cast, but he doesn't get to see you do it. And that's where the best instruction comes, when there's somebody standing at your shoulder saying, okay,
feedback. Yeah.
Here's what's going on. Yep. And you can even take their hand. I quite often, I'm teaching casting, I'll take the person's hand and hold the rod with them, so I can transmit the feeling of what you're doing from my hand to their hand.
Now, Jim,
during COVID, but we can do it now.
Exactly. And how the same force that you're, I guess, going forward with, is that the same force you're pulling back with?
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, and that's something that people, if they've only been spin fishing, they don't know that. Because spin fishing, it's move it back and throw it forward.
Throw it, exactly.
Cast it back and cast it forward. So.
That is super neat. Wow. Has the technology and products changed over the years for the better? So going to carbon fiber.
Yeah, Oh, for sure. Just like all other sports,
Yeah.
golf clubs are, I'm
Mhm.
sure, are way better today than they were 50 years ago.
The hickory sticks. Yeah.
And skis and all that stuff, and fly rods for sure
Yeah.
are much lighter, much more responsive,
Mhm.
and you can just they're far better tools than what we had 30, 40 years ago. And
Is
that's not going to stop. I think the improvements are going to be pretty small because and they've said this for 100 years, I suppose. Well, how can we make them any better? They can't possibly get any better. Well, little by little, they seem to. So,
yeah.
yeah, it's the same thing as happens with all other sporting equipment or any kind of equipment. Your
Yeah.
phone, you never need a new phone, but you have to get one.
Forcefully now.
Forcefully? Well,
Well,
yeah,
they're
you're
upgrading
forcefully.
iPhones constantly. So
Yeah, yeah. And
with
I don't need a phone to do anything more than my phone 3 phones ago did. But I can't use that anymore. At least that's not true with fly tag. You can still use your fly rod from 20 years ago, and it'll do exactly now what it did then. You can't say about your phone or your computer, can you?
do you still keep some of your old
Oh yeah,
rods?
we've got lots of stuff. Yeah, we have quite a lot of stuff that we need
Mhm.
for when we teach schools. Quite often we provide some equipment.
Do you have like a favorite fly, a floating fly?
Um, Not exactly. I know you're supposed to, but there's a
Says who?
what's that?
Says who?
I don't know. The favorite one is the one that I just got a fish on. How about that one?
Hey, that's a great answer.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a sliding scale. It changes from day to day.
Yeah. Does Lynda paint other things or just trout in specific?
She paints some other things. She likes doing the insects. She's quite hung up on some of these insects. Likes doing the drawings and
Super
drawing
neat.
the
Yeah.
insects. And she also does some dog stuff. We have hunting dogs, and so she's done a portrait of each of the dogs we've had over the last
Mm-hmm.
30 years or 40 years, whatever it is. And she's done some drawings of our grandkids, our 2 grandsons. So, yep, she's more into the trout and the fly fishing stuff than she does more of that than in the other things, but she's interested in it all.
It's super cool though that Lynda and yourself met and simultaneously both of you enjoy something together.
Well, yeah, it was. It's kind of an interesting story because Lynda was not an outdoor girl. She was born well, she was born in Cranbrook, but she grew up in the Lower Mainland in
Right.
the Langley sort of area, or Surrey which to me is all Vancouver. When we met, I was fly fishing then, and she liked the idea. It mostly started with casting. If you see someone casting, it can be kind of a graceful, a neat thing. So she was very interested in that, and she just, and it's kind of the way she is. She just says, "Well, I want to do that too." Okay, well, we'll do that.
Fun.
So here we are, 45 years later or whatever, and we're both still doing it. So it's great.
In the beginning of the book, you have something for your grandsons, Levi and Xander, who at 5 and 7 already know that the heart of knowledge is curiosity. What does that mean to you, curiosity, and how do you define that?
Well, it's I think being naturally curious serves you well in a lot of life. I kind of stay away from the idea of making fly fishing about eternity and spirituality and all that sort of stuff. But the best fly fishers I know, and I would say this, the best sort of outdoor people in general that I know, whether they're hunting or fishing or hiking or photographing stuff, are very curious. They want to know, what's this? I haven't seen this before. And it's not something that comes to me naturally. I wish I was curiouser by nature. I try and be curious now, but and these little guys are grandsons. They're already curious about stuff. You show them, some kind of bug, nothing to do with fishing necessarily.
Anything in general.
They just want to. Well, why is he doing that? How does this work? Or how does this? It's some kind of little puzzle thing or something. Well, how does this work? How can I want to put this together? How does this go? And I just think that it's really apparent that those guys they've got the curiosity instinct that may or may not take them fly fishing. And of course, we'd like it if they did, but they're their own people, and whatever they do is they'll be served well by their curiosity. I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
What made you publish a book, Jim?
Well, this is actually the fifth book.
Mm-hmm.
It's a collection of magazine pieces.
This one.
That I gathered. I realized I have a previous collection, and that was, I think, 12 years ago, and I thought, oh, maybe I've got enough that I can turn it into another collection. And I looked through all my stuff, and I had more than enough, so I picked out the ones that I thought were the strongest and gathered them together and conned a publisher into the idea of publishing.
And the name Trout Tracks.
That's just a kind of a brainstorming thing. Don Gorman from Rocky Mountain Books, and we just started throwing things back and forth, and that one came up. And it should be short. Book title should generally be short, and the alliteration of Trout Tracks seems
makes sense.
One-syllable words, and it's kind of, there are no trout tracks, but there kind of are.
Before we get going here, Jim, what do you hope for that the next generation, people in Alberta that are interested in fly fishing, get out of your books, get out of your stories, Lynda's artwork, your guys' story as a couple? What do you hope for?
Yeah, well, I guess I hope they would get some sort of, mainly, I guess, inspiration or a sense of the urgency to protect these kind of places where these creatures live. Fly fishing is only the vehicle that takes us into these places. And as Roderick Haig Brown said, or many years ago, I'll paraphrase, he said, if all fly fishing is a reason to go into nice places, I'm glad I thought of it. So it's not quite right, but it's something like that. So I mean, I would hope that maybe it takes people in there and makes them realize what a wonderful places these are. And it's not just streams, and it's not just trout, and it's not just fishing, and it's not just hunting or whatever, but the whole, I guess I'm coming off like an environmentalist. I guess maybe I am. So
it grew on you.
Well, it did. Yeah. It's more and more important as time goes by. And when I think of our grandkids, I hope they have at least the chance to see and do some of the stuff that we've done. I hope we haven't messed it up so bad that it'll be gone by the time they grow up.
Is there a favorite place that you have here in Alberta, or a place?
Well, there's lots. It's a little like the favorite fly thing, and it's maybe even more like your kids. I don't have I only have one child, so she was my favorite. But you don't have favorite kids. I fish. I like fishing the Bow River. It was my home stream for many years because I was guiding on it and fished that. I've probably fished there more than any place else, although I don't spend as much time on it now as I used to. But I like a lot of the other streams that are well known in Alberta. The whole Old Man River system is a really great, great place to fish. Lots of different tributaries to the Old Man, and there's some streams north of Calgary that can be good. So we're really good. The whole western or eastern slopes of the mountains in Alberta is basically all the streams coming off the mountains or from the mountains are trout streams, until they get out too far from their sources to where the water is too warm for trout. So there's our main river systems would be the Old Man, the Bow, the Red Deer, North Saskatchewan from here, and then the tributaries to those, as well as those streams themselves, can be really good. So, but I guess I would say the Bow and and a whole bunch of streams in the Old Man, the Old Man system would be my favorites.
Are you fishing anytime soon? I guess in August, end of August. Wow, it's already coming up to an end soon.
Yeah, I better hurry up. We are actually, yes, we are on Friday. We are going to Jasper for a couple of days. I grew up fishing in Jasper. I grew up in Edmonton, and I used to go to Jasper Park and fish mostly lakes there. That's mostly what there is to fish.
Mhm.
And so I'm going to write a magazine piece about kind of going back to visit some of those places where I fished when I was a teenager, and we're going to go there and do one or two of the places that I want to see that.
Do you canoe or kayak to Spirit Island right there?
No, I've never been that far. That's Moline Lake. I've never been all the way up the lake. It's quite a ways up there.
Oh,
Have you done that?
I haven't yet, but I see images of it and I'm saying, this is a place I have to see one day.
Oh yeah, you can't, let's see, I think you take electric motors on boats up there, or you can also there's a big tour boat that'll take you up there, I think.
Oh, okay. So it's quite a ways away. It's not.
It's quite a ways away. Yeah, it's Moline Lake. I think is 16 or 18 miles long, and Spirit Island. When you see in all the
Photos,
I think about halfway up.
Oh wow! Okay, so it's a haul.
Yeah. But you can canoe it. I know guys who've canoed it. If you're a good canoeist, that's not that big a deal. So.
Where would someone find your articles? Like, say, this one that you will be publishing. Where would that be?
It's going to be in a magazine called Fly Fusion.
Okay.
Quite a lot of stuff from this book came from Fly Fusion. Yeah. And some other fly fishing magazines. There's a really good fly fishing magazine in the US called Fly Fisherman. And I also write something every year for the Alberta Fishing Guide. It's an annual magazine, and quite a few other things. So can I just say, if people are interested in the book, they should be able to find it in Calgary fly shops. And if not, we can just personalize and sign a copy and mail it to
For sure.
You find us at our website at McLennanflyfishing.com.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks again, Jim.
All right, Zach. Thank you for doing this, and keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Appreciate being part of it. Thank you.
All right. Say hi to Lynda for me.
I will.